There's a lot of ground to cover. Why don't we start with this little indie game called The Legend of Zelda?
Indie game.
Tiny.
Yeah, tiny game, right?
It came out in the US
game.
in '87, but surprisingly, it lagged behind Japan by about 2 years, which is crazy.
Yeah, well, it was designed to be a launch game for the Famicom Disk System.
Yep, a peripheral we never got that was rewritable media, like floppy disk size. It was yellow. It had the discs were yellow. They had Nintendo emblazoned on them.
You could go to the gas station and stick in a floppy disk and get a new game on it.
We didn't want that anyway.
I know.
We didn't want that anyway.
It was kind of silly because then you wouldn't have a gold cartridge, right?
Right.
Which is the coolest thing
Gold
ever.
cartridge.
Yeah.
That was the holy grail, right?
It was really all I cared about when I first saw Zelda. I saw it in the store and I was like, it has a little window in the box so you can see the gold cartridge, and that blew my mind.
Who was behind that?
I mean, Nintendo
of America marketers.
So that was brilliant marketing.
Yeah, in Japan, like gold is not associated that closely to Zelda. I mean, sure, the limited edition systems will have like gold trims, but most of the boxes are green. Like they have, especially for the old games. Like,
well, no, they have all kinds of color boxes then. Yeah. But did you guys play Legend of Zelda back in the day?
Oh yeah.
And Chris, you?
I did a lot of sitting there watching my friend play through it when he wouldn't share.
Because I think, Jose, you didn't play it until more recently, right?
No, I absolutely played. Played a ton of the original.
It was Brian Altano.
I only beat it recently. Like, so I watched my friend play it, and then I played it as an adult. I only played it like completely all the way through the first time a couple of years ago.
Me too.
And it's a very, very deep game for that system.
That's amazing.
Like even for now, there's a lot of stuff that obviously there's a lot of stuff.
It doesn't let on anything, right?
No.
Like there's the set of clues in the game don't help you. The playground and talking about it outside of playing the game helps you. And Nintendo Power.
Nintendo Power. Yeah, that was
the fold-out map is in the first issue. Yeah. That wasn't until '88 though.
When that came out.
Yeah, that issue came out. So
it came out. The game was released in August 22nd, so it was the back half of the year in '87.
But you needed the map by then. And actually, it was a second quest map. But there was lots of game help for it. I have like a generic Zelda book, but my favorite thing is I buy a lot of NES games, and I'm a collector, and so I have multiple copies of Zelda. And I always pick it up because in the box, in the notes section, or with it, there's always like somebody's parents' like maps that they help them draw, or the kid themselves. It's mainly like something that looks a lot nicer. And then it's like, and I've been to people's houses before. They're like, yeah, this is the maps my mom made for Zelda and stuff like that. I always thought that was really
cool. The gold cartridge was a big draw, obviously, like just physically looking at it. But then when you actually played that game, and the fact that most every game, I feel, at least I played as a kid, unfolded through levels. They unfolded through, okay, now this is World 1-2, this is 1-3. Like they went in a sequence, whereas this, everything was spread out, and you were finding dungeons, and you were finding secrets, and you were really sort of invested in this world. And then years later to learn that Miyamoto based a lot of that core game design, the idea of the exploration, on like his childhood experience, exploring, the hills in Kyoto. Like that was pretty touching stuff when I found out about it. I was like, wow, this is so personal, versus so many other games.
I like how they call the dungeons levels anyway.
They do, yeah, absolutely.
Really,
but it was still sort of scattered and spread through an overworld. Like that was so smart.
I think you had to do that at the time because people didn't understand anything different. They're like, okay, level, this is where I go next.
Yeah. This is a very early example of open world game design.
Yes, absolutely.
You could freely wander everywhere you wanted to in the overworld. You kind of have some freedom with how you tackle dungeons. It's not totally up to you.
Yeah, you're somewhat limited by your tool set.
Yeah.
But then you're mainly limited by how many hearts you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if you try to go to if you range outside where you should, you just get hammered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's tough to just be an expert at that game. It's like you need to be able to absorb some damage later on.
That was frustrating when I was a kid. Is that the short sword stroke? It has a really, really steep learning curve, I think, although you get more powerful.
And lining it up,
and
right?
I didn't understand that. I was always really frustrated by Zelda, unlike you, only beat it very recently. With Brian Altano's help, because he memorized every single bush you can burn, wall you can bomb, or anything. I'd come in and be like, Brian, I need more hearts. He's like, did you get this one? Did you get this one? Did you get this one? He has it all up here. He says he plays it yearly.
It's amazing how many sequence breaks were already there in that game. And it's also interesting to point out that I feel like America did have an intro to that style of game, not so much in text adventures, but definitely in Adventure, which was a game I didn't play for the Atari, but Nintendo, history is unclear if Nintendo saw that and then said, hey, we're going to improve on this or not, but they definitely did, regardless. Like visually much better. It was a lot easier to sort of understand the tools you had to work with.
Warren Robinett, who made Adventure, said he based that entirely on Colossal Cave Adventure.
That's right.
The text game, and in fact, it's almost room for room was originally set up to be like Colossal Cave Adventure. So there's a rich tradition of adventure games becoming slowly graphical adventures. It's really neat. It's kind of sad that Zelda's kind of gone away from that adventure type game, and that it's become more linear and sequenced.
Exactly, yeah.
Over
narrative focus is definitely picked up in a lot of them, and I feel like
narrative. That's right.
it's interesting to see if they will recapture that idea, but they got it so right the first time.
It feels like everybody clamors for narrative when in a game like Zelda, I don't feel like you absolutely need it. It is the pure exploration and adventure of that game. Do you guys remember that commercial?
That's what I want to say. You said your first encounter with Zelda was the cold cartridge at the store, but my first encounter was that commercial.
Yeah. Octorocks!
Yeah, it was so.
Wait, is that it's not the rap one with the girl that's playing Link? That's for Link to the Past. I think.
No, it was some comedian from the time.
Oh,
and he's like dressed all in black, wandering around these black rooms, shouting for Zelda, and then shouting out the names of the enemies and making these strange noises. It's really bizarre.
Yeah. It's bizarre, but it's like that game, more than anything. Now I was like, what is an Octorok?
Yeah.
Like I really wanted to know.
They also showed footage from the game, and I had a Nintendo at the time, and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I got to check out this game.
Yeah. And then the narrative does, I mean, it's to your point about narratives and how some games don't need them, I will say the narrative to The Legend of Zelda, the original, becomes your experience playing it. Where it was like, hey, with this whistle, I blew it, and all of a sudden a hurricane, like a tornado came and took me somewhere else. And it became like stuff you told your friends about, either at school or on the playground. You'd hear like these things from either tip lines or from friends who'd say, hey, if you go here, do this thing, burn this specific bush, you'll find an entrance to a dungeon. And you're like, I can't wait to get home so I can check if this is real.
And then the rumors of the second quest, and then that turned out to be true. There's a whole, and that was because of a strange miscalculation in memory, that there was actually twice as much memory to use for dungeons. So there's more dungeon layouts than there were originally there. But the second quest, that was the coolest thing ever. It was such a huge game. It was just like, it's just massive. Like Super Mario Brothers is famous for being full of secrets, and this just took that to another level. And of course, it was sequentially the next game that Shigeru Miyamoto made, and secrets.
That's what I wanted to point out. This is Miyamoto's follow-up to Super Mario Brothers, and he deliberately wanted to contrast it with the linearity of Mario Brothers, and that's why he designed it more of an open world game with lots more player choice.
Yeah, and the spirit of that game definitely lives on a lot today. Maybe not, I mean, obviously it still lives on in Zelda franchises is today, but definitely the Dark Souls games tap into, and the Demon Souls, the From Software, those adventure games do tie or into that feeling of, mystery and unknown. Now, to be fair though, those games intentionally make their design very vague, so you're not sure what each item will have an effect on or how you're supposed to level. I feel like Zelda didn't really do that, but just the feeling of exploring this like hostile world and not really being sure where it's going to take you. I think the From games absolutely.
I think we had more tolerance for that back then too. I remember renting every NES game. I would just go through the store and rent them every week. In the weekend my parents would get a movie, but I would go get a game. And it'd be at like the supermarket or something. And when you get Zelda, it was equivalent to me in quality to like Milan's Secret Castle. Like I didn't really know, like those are like two impenetrably difficult games to figure out. And one of them is actually going to be remembered fondly. There's no IGN to tell me that kind of thing back then.
Right. Yeah.
Zelda was the first NES game to sell over 1 million copies. Went on to sell 6.5 million.
How is that possible? Because like Duck Hunt and Super Mario Brothers were packed in. So maybe it was on a standalone?
Yeah, maybe they're talking about not including bundles.
Yeah.
But it established the action-adventure genre. I want to ask you guys this. Do you think Zelda helped legitimize console gaming in the eyes of PC gamers at the time?
PC gamers were already in their own world. There was so much out. King's Quest came out the next year. It was like such a big time for PC gaming. And I think like it was a difference between adults and kids. I don't think a lot of adults got into NESs, but a lot of adults like had, even in college, like had computers and stuff. So maybe it legitimized Zelda to, legitimized Nintendo to a little bit older crowd.
I'm not sure that PC gamers still feel that consoles are legitimate. So I mean, I think it brought some people over, but I always got the sense at that time that they were different worlds completely. Like I would play my computer or I'd go play my NES, and even I, as a child, was like, this is more of a toy.
Yeah. And it was always the same differences, right? Hardware was superior, sound was superior, like on the PC side versus what console was doing. I will say, like, I didn't grow up a PC gamer, but I would be surprised if folks did kind of look down their nose at Zelda, only because of how deep and complex that world was and how it tapped into a style of action-adventure, a genre that I don't think was very, like, it basically made that very popular, despite how sort of open and how difficult that adventure could be.
Yeah.